When you're in your mid-20s, you really only have three options.
Get married,
Get a master's,
or run a marathon.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I'm Francis,
And welcome to this week's episode of the Zone 2 podcast,
where we explore all there is to learn about the world of heartbreak.
Oh, there you go. So, Francis, we met through our dear mutual friend, Claire Tinker, shout out, who I met at the Tuesday morning Heartbreak track workouts. So really, without Heartbreak, this podcast wouldn't exist in the first place. And we are in the house with the man to blame, chief heartbreaker, coach, and co-founder of the Heartbreak Hill Running Company, Dan Fitzgerald. Thanks for having us here at the Heartbreak store in Newton. Since we record weekly, we like to kick things off with just a quick recap of your week of training. And I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your week.
Sure. My name's Dan Fitzgerald. I'm co-founder of Heartbreak Hill Running Company. I'm also a Nike running coach. This week is a pretty standard training week for me. What made this week unique was I was in Santa Monica, where we just opened a store on May 1st. And my purpose for being there was to support our activations around Grand Slam track. But with Grand Slam canceled, it turned into strictly a family vacation, which was much needed, excellent time off. And my training was pretty standard while I was there. Just I like to run and do some upper body training integrated in some way every day. So more of the same.
Amazing. So Dan, let's take a step back. Anyone in Boston would recognize you as one of the faces behind the iconic Heartbreak Hill Running Company, but you were running before you became Chief Heartbreaker. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about your background as an athlete?
Yeah, for sure. So I really wanted to play basketball. In high school, I played soccer, basketball, and track. I knew I was going to be best at running, but I worked probably hardest at basketball. I competed in my first 800 meters at the end of my freshman year. I was put in varsity early and then ran the 100, the 200, and was sort of finding my way. Wasn't going to be the way. But then when I ran the 800, my coach said, "Okay, we got your race," and really focused on that. When I got to college, I earned a partial scholarship to Boston College and ran the 800 meters there. And really enjoyed running from the perspective of like training really hard, being a part of a team, trying to win. Those were the only things I liked about running. There was no looking around at the trees and it was not about joy. It wasn't about love. It was about trying to win. And eventually that evolved, but it started in like the sport I was best at, and I wanted to be like the best athlete I could be. I wasn't going to play D1 ball, that was clear. So, but I could run at a Division I level. So I took that and I guess literally ran with it, for use of a bad pun here. And that's how the journey started for me. It evolved from there and just has always been a part of my life. I am a surfer, and my advantage in surfing, having started at 18 and working in the surf industry, I got exposed to a lot of really good surfers. My only advantage was fitness. So when you start at 18, you're 16 years behind the guys who were from California in terms of getting really good. So I gave myself to that, but running was always the thing that was there with me through relationships, through that career. And then when my career in the surf industry ended and my marriage at the time ended, running was always the thing that was there. And starting this business was a way to double down on that sort of almost felt like a skill advantage I had, having given myself so much as a coach and an athlete at the Division I level, and then it was just always there. And I came to be, I guess, a more thoughtful runner and a person who really enjoyed the process of just going out and going for a run, and what it did for my mental health, physical health, much, much later. I'd say I wouldn't call myself a runner until I was probably in my 30s, even though I considered myself more of a failed basketball player than anything. But it's more of a misassessment of myself, but it was always reluctant for a while. We get that with customers too. People come in and say, "Oh, I'm not a runner," but they're in a running store buying running shoes, getting ready for a marathon. So I can relate to that because I was absolutely that for a long time.
Yeah, I guess it's not that yes or no, like you're a runner, you're not a runner. For me, I feel like I can't exactly put my finger on exactly when I feel like I made that switch. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's running a marathon, maybe it's somewhere in between, but that's definitely different from person to person. But it's interesting hearing And hearing from people in the past too, how your perspective on the sport and your relationship with the sport kind of changed, both coming through as you said, a failed basketball player to as a collegiate athlete, and then in your career post-collegiately and surfing as well. It's really interesting.
Yeah. I think part of it just comes from, how you identify yourself. I think about myself. I know people see me as a runner, as a coach, and a running business person. If I see myself as anything, it's, a business person now. It's still running is just, I think for many people, just a part of who they are. So as a whole identity, it feels like I would bristle at it, but it is a core part of who I am. Absolutely.
So you say it's not a good idea to make running your entire personality?
You can if you want. It helps maybe with clicks and likes.
That's true. Yeah.
What about podcasting?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Well, if you're both, then you're two things at least.
Oh, there you go.
True. That's true.
Something of a hybrid hobbyist.
Hybrid athlete.
Hybrid athlete.
Well, it's funny. We had Yupi on in an earlier episode, and she was saying how she worked for Brooks, and she's not a professional runner, but she's a running professional. And I think that's a good term to describe like myself. Like, I am not a professional runner, but I'm a running professional.
You're not getting paid to do it yet.
I'm not getting paid to run, but it's like I run, but I also have a job and I have a podcast that I talk about running. So
that's true.
Yeah.
Very well-rounded guy.
Yeah.
So you met your current business partner as a teammate at BC, correct? And you started South End Athletics in 2009. Can you tell us a little bit about the initial vision of opening that first running store and kind of how it's evolved over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Justin Burden is my co-founder. We met as incoming freshmen at Boston College the week before the whole student body gets there. Athletes are there for camp, so we were there for cross-country camp, met at right in the shadow of Conti Forum. That used to be kind of a crappier parking lot. Now I think there's still a parking lot there, but it's a little nicer. And we were friends, and we're co-captains of the team by the time we graduated. And he went off into accounting. I worked at a running store for maybe 6-8 months, and then got a job in the surf industry, and we sort of went our separate ways career-wise, but stayed in touch, partied together all the time. And whenever we're hanging out, we'd usually go for a run. And then when my career at Quicksilver ended in 2009, he had risen multiple times at Ernst & Young, up into like mergers and acquisitions, and in Toronto. He's Canadian, and he still didn't really like accounting anymore. Having risen all those different places, he was still sort of like, say, lukewarm at best on accounting. Of course, he's still doing a lot of it for us now, but but it's in the context of a lot more fun when it's your own business. But so we pulled our separate skill sets, where I was on the brand side with Quicksilver and sales and activations and all that, and always working in service of retail. Justin was always working on, eventually the due diligence side of mergers and acquisitions. And it was just a fun way to sort of double down on what was our personal athletic experience and turn that into something that we could do for a living. We had explored whether we should do a t-shirt company, and having, just worked at Quicksilver where they were making, I don't know, probably 600 variations of t-shirts per season. It didn't feel like there was something we could compete with there. It was before like the real artisanal everything boom, but I felt like we could create something in running that had its own brand identity. That was a place where athletes could come and hang, and just a cool place to shop. I was influenced by the shops I'd seen in New York, like back then, early Supreme, and Kith wasn't there yet. But there's a really cool skate shop in Long Island called Special Sauce that I loved. And there were just some really cool retailers that I had seen over the years that I admired and thought it'd be fun to do something like that. We saw the South End spot and thought, all right, well, let's do it in the city. We were looking all over the place. We were looking from Portsmouth down to Newport, Rhode Island, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, south. So really looking anywhere, and decided, well, let's play ball in the city. That's, we're competitive people. We want to be in the action. So we started South End Athletic Company. I designed the logo then. It was just SEAC and the same font we use now with 4 arrows after it to sort of balance it. The catchphrase or the call to action was keep moving forward. That's what the sign on the side of the store said. And all black and white, similar brand aesthetic. The shop had no, they call it POP, point of purchase stuff from other vendors. I wanted our store to have its own vibe and space that just sort of spoke by being what it was. We had our own t-shirt program, which we started with, which was really important, so that there could be a brand identity for ourselves. And that was that. It was it was fun working side by side. It's shocking to see how little business we did back then and, how we thought it was viable then. But the same could be said now on a different scale probably. But so the goal was just create something that felt different, felt meaningful to people who came in, earned trust and respect, one customer at a time. And then that was sort of the retail side, but there was always the programming side where we created the first free public speed workout as a coach session every week in Boston, before there was the November Project or Tracksmith or anything else here. We were doing exactly what you see at 6:30 p.m. at every store is imbued in the fabric of how we started. And the expectation that athletes could self-identify as a runner and get better at it, have maybe elevate their expectations of what they could do. As I always thought, as a former 800-meter runner, people don't focus enough on speed. They're not giving themselves the opportunity to feel stronger and faster by just going the same speed every day comfortably. You got to open it up a little bit. You can do it in safe ways. You can do it in 200 meters. You can do it. And so I started with very bite-sized track workouts. We would go to the track, would do 3x200, full drill session, 2 laps, jog the turn, stride the straights. And that was it. That was the workout. So it was much more gentle than what we do now. So I sort of learned to balance how much the general public could take. And that's how we started.
I guess kind of pulling that thread a little bit further, was the decision to start offering those free speed workouts, was that a brand decision or was that a running community decision? I guess what was the intention behind that? I mean, obviously you want everyone to be as fit and in the most safe way as possible. But I also think from a business decision, that's a great idea to offer that as a service to your customers.
Yeah, I think, I get a lot of credit for community building and that kind of thing, which is fine. I'll say thank you and take that. But it wasn't, if it was for a reason, it was so that I expect runners to be better. It wasn't it wasn't to build a lot of people. It wasn't, Instagram didn't exist. I don't think when 2009, Instagram didn't exist. There's no one you're going to go tell you were a runner via some visual medium. It wasn't about that. It was about people are out there getting slower every day, and I think that's boring. I want them to get faster and feel more powerful. I know there's more for athletes out there. I want to just have a space where they can come get that and then drink beers after. That was it. It wasn't about being anything other than who I was as a person and an athlete, and trying to bring that into the store as part of it's just it could be brilliant community building, or it could be don't know a different way or have any better options. It was just strictly how I saw running as something that you should do certain things. If you want to be right, you should run fast. You should do some drills. You should do some strength, all that stuff.
So it sounds almost like the product of Heartbreak becoming this, I would call it one of the centers of the Boston running community, was almost a byproduct of an alternative goal. But that being said, I would still definitely consider, and I feel like you would agree, that Heartbreak is absolutely at the center of so much that goes on in the running community here in Boston. What role do you think Heartbreak now plays in that community?
Yeah, I think, thanks for saying that about us. I think we started for that reason, to help runners get better. But I think what I learned is that it worked, and then that there becomes sort of a responsibility to make sure that we're caring for every athlete that comes in at the level at which they bring themselves, So it's being able to make a track workout or design workouts that can work for a variety of athletes. It's, as we've grown now to our, various vendor partnerships and brand activations, there's sort of a responsibility from me where we built things one customer at a time, one person at a time, because that's what our financial opportunity was. Now we get more freedom and creativity with access to vendor partnerships and things that can really make say something bigger and something fun. When I think about our activation for the Boston Marathon in 2024, the Do It Here, where we had a party at Concepts and we hired Neems, we had Jay Schul do some music, and then we did the street fair outside. For me, that was all part of, we had the Oakley Bike Gang going around. That was all about Michelle Wu's vision for the city, where she had said in some of her speeches that Boston, in reference to her ideas for like free public transit, she had said Boston used to be a place of bold ideas, where it's the first free public library, it's the first large scale free municipal public library, the first public school, the first university at Harvard across the river. But we claim that, obviously, first subway, the first marathon in the United States. So all of these bold firsts took place in Boston. First shot in the Revolutionary War, I believe. There are a lot of them that you can reference, and yet there's still sort of this feeling sometimes that the marathon and sometimes the city itself is slow, or it can't be culture leading. And I think I'd like to take opportunities like the Boston Marathon to do two things, like say something powerful about our city and reflect our city at the same time, and like make it really fun for the people who are coming in, like be surprising and be fun and say like, wow, this is cool. Where a kid in the neighborhood behind the South End shop can just be like, what a cool party this is. Like, why are you doing this? And be like, oh, it's Boston Marathon weekend, rather than, there are lots of other ways to express the marathon, but I like to use it as an opportunity to say like, this is who the city is. This is who our running community is. And sometimes this year it involved Bill Rogers and the quintessential Boston Billy story, and the anniversary of his 50 years of winning his first marathon and the Nikes that he wrote back and forth to Stefan Prefontaine about. And so we had him and those shoes there. That was really cool. So there's things like that where I like to just reflect the community and the city and, think about the world from like big and bold ideas, because, like I said, there's more to all of us than just running. So how can we inspire people on a human level using running as sort of how we meet each other, but then raise the standard to something bigger?
So obviously, from its origins as South End Athletic Company, things have definitely increased in scale. What would you say has changed in terms of the goals of Heartbreak in the last 15 years?
Yeah, and the goals has remained pretty steady, surprisingly. Like we wanted to open a place that felt like it had its own brand identity, its powerful perspective in the world that people would think is cool. That was it. It was one shop, and it's still kind of that. One of the funny things is that we started as South End Athletic Company because I ran the 800 meters. I could not have cared less about the Boston Marathon, even though it went right by my alma mater or where I was going to school. I would just like wake up late, probably be like, sweet, the gym's empty today. I can get it all to myself and go for a run. Maybe watch a couple of leaders go by and go home. So when we opened, we didn't have anything to do with the Boston Marathon. We didn't even talk about it, didn't talk about marathoning. It had nothing to do with our brand identity whatsoever. And that wasn't good for business. When we opened here, my attitude then was like, the marathon is one accepted distance of international competition, of which there are many, so why do we only have to focus on that? So, but, it is a catalyst for a lot of, I think, human experiences. It's a catalyst for like people to prove to themselves and other people they can do hard things. And when we opened this store, we called it Heartbreak Hill Running Company. We're right on this like super highway of athletes training all the time, and we tapped into that energy. At that point, it really grew the business, grew our notoriety. And so there was that pivot toward just training generally where people needed the most help. Like athletes training for the mile and the 800, generally they're on a team, they're young athletes, right? And if they're older and on a team, they definitely don't need help. So the marathon is really where people need the most help. They sign up for something and then they're terrified. You can't really fake it. You actually need a lot of guidance. So that really like changed a lot of how we thought about the business and evolved our programming. But your bigger question, how is the goal for the business evolved, is we want to be the most influential running brand in the world. And that's it. It's probably not going to be the biggest in terms of sales. I don't see us eclipsing whatever Nike's $50-60 billion is. They started as a running company. They're bigger. I don't know that I want to be that big and have that many problems either. There's a power in being nimble that we can really enjoy. That's the business goal. But I think, the most important currency in that goal, I think, is affecting people, like people coming in and feeling like this is cool, or like whatever they see, whatever their touch point is, whether it's practice at MIT or the Reggie or, one of our activations at the NCAAs or, walking into a shop. I want them to think like, this is cool. This feels cool, no matter who you are, whether you run or not, so that's really my goal. I think that's partly resonating from my time at Quicksilver, where Quicksilver was one of the biggest, most exciting global brands in the mid-2000s, as the surf industry was exploding. And Now it has exploded and is a fraction of itself. And at the time, Quicksilver was a publicly traded company, but they were selling a ton of stuff away from the ocean, right? It was like they sold in malls all over the country. And to me, there was something that resonated about that brand and lifestyle with everyone, whether they surfed or not. Not everyone, but maybe on the youth culture side. And I think running's going through that similar, like it has this importance culturally. And I think I want to be the brand that captures it in a way that makes people feel something within themselves rather than being like a super hyper-focused niche element of running. I like the idea of making sure that we're leading with fun and connection. And, from there, helping people connect to themselves. I think as a brand can, that's how brands exist, is you see something in that thing, whether it's, I hope we do it authentically. I always fear the opposite, but I'm happy with where we are now. And, it's been an authentic growth the whole way, where like we've gone new places to fulfill the need that we saw and just go be who we are and service that community as it is and grow reputation that way.
So you talk about authenticity and maintaining that authenticity through growing. And I think that that's something that a lot of brands do struggle with in all sorts of different spaces. And I think a big part of that has to do with how brands are funded. And I think this model that they have. And I know that there's a lot of talk about other brands, especially in the running space, that rely really heavily on venture capital money in order to grow. But Heartbreak has managed to avoid that and still managed to retain this air of authenticity while also expanding. Heartbreak's now in 5 locations in 3 cities. Just this year, Heartbreak opened its location in Santa Monica. I was curious if you could share a little bit about what the process was like expanding into that market and how Heartbreak decided that that was the next place to be.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if we've avoided venture capital or they've avoided us. You could goes both ways, I think. We've pitched some and basically that goes nowhere because I think they're looking for, I think some brands come up and say, we're going to do this, hit this niche, and we'll do it this way. You spend this much money, you can like acquire a customer base. There are certain ways that I think are functional ways to build a brand for the purposes of making a lot of money. That's what venture capital is exceptional at, right? And we are, I don't think we're excellent at making money. we're excellent at staying alive. But, there's, for us, that's why I think, for me, I think about athletes like if Sha'Carri is hanging out with a bunch of WNBA players, she's probably, once the reverence of like who she is culturally wears off, she's still the weird runner person. No one in a room of basketball players knows what she does all day to be an athlete, right? And like every runner can feel that and know that, right? You're the weird person who does marathons in your office, or I don't know. He just runs all weekend, I guess. I don't know what he does. And
he disappears for 4 hours on a Saturday.
and that resonates, from Olympic champions, through people learning to do a 5K that they don't quite get the running. And I think that's really cool and connective. So the Santa Monica shop is a celebration of sprinting, so the pictures you're going to see on the wall have nothing to do with the marathon, nothing to do with Boston. There's actually a really cool nails sort of vignette that Marielle Hall, our GM out there, created. That's a nod to Sha'Carri and FloJo. And I think for me, it's a place to express the pinnacle of the sport, that sprinting aspect that we all want to go as fast as we can. It's just, that's why most of us are marathoners. That's the shortest possible distance you could, feel good about yourself. And it's hard to win the 100, right? That's what everybody wants to do when you start in recess and racing people. And the top of the sport has, I think, all of that attitude. And I don't think there's a proper expression of that on a daily basis in retail. So that's what we set out to create in our LA store in Santa Monica. So there's that flavor to the store itself, but at the end of it, it's not like we're just selling stuff to sprinters. Sprinters are not all just walking around, trying to shop at the running store. So the programming mirrors what we do, but the store itself is a celebration of like that pinnacle of the sport, which is really fun for us as track athletes. And I think authentic to the city of LA, where it's, we're in Santa Monica, we're a mile and a half from Santa Monica College, where Santa Monica Track Club used to work out, Carl Lewis and like the legendary sprinters of the day were there. So to tap into that LA energy as the LA Olympics are coming is really the goal. And we're shipping a lot to California. So, our internet business is half of our business, and business takes place where people who run live. So they order from, our ship tos are California, Florida, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, there's, and then, Massachusetts and Chicago. But Illinois is, I think in the top 10. Massachusetts punches above its weight because we've been here the longest. But other than that, our business is where people live, which is really cool. And a lot of people live in LA. And I think there's a lot of culture creating that goes on in LA that we want to be a part of, that we think we can service in our own authentic way. I think I used to be kind of scared of, going to a new place and, how do I speak authentically to an audience in Chicago? I'm from Boston. I ran 2 marathons. I ran the 800. I have a certain amount of credibility as an athlete, but I also wonder, like, how can I speak to these people as an outsider, And I think it's understanding that, the goal for me as a speaker it's not about me. It's about helping the people in the audience connect to why they're there. And that, like, once I started to see that more clearly, then I got a lot more confidence around, like, being able to be, that's not me, but I applied that to the business too, that we can authentically reflect a place by serving that place. Marielle had a really good quote that I wrote down somewhere in one of my notebooks, where she said, people look to small business to, like, reflect what they love about their community. And I was like, that's genius. I'm writing that down. We can be that for Santa Monica. Like, our storefront is crazy out there. My daughter is 8. She got out of the car. She's like, wow, Dad, this is so cool. I was like, it's a very proud moment for me, because, like, it's a cool shop, and to be able to be a part of a culture like that with so much history and just be there to do it justice and celebrate it isn't something I should be worried about. Like, can we earn respect? It's like, we've only ever earned respect because we have values and respect for community. We're not trying to take anything over. We're trying to serve the athletes and community who are there and show them that we love what they do. We love the sport, and we're there for them. So that's sort of the emotional side of opening in Los Angeles. And the other side is just, placing a strategic bet, not overspending, and praying it works.
So in Boston, I feel like there are a lot of different running shops. And I feel like when you talk about brand identity, you have a very clear vision of what Heartbreak is. And you have companies like Marathon Sports, you have companies like Hoka, you have companies like Tracksmith, and they all sort of serve the same demographic in a way. But when you walk into Heartbreak, I feel like there's something different. And it's something that my friends have articulated to me, like the difference specifically between Marathon Sports and Fleet Feet and then Heartbreak. How would you articulate that difference? And what do you think it comes down to?
Yeah, I think Marathon and Fleet Feet are the same now. Fleet Feet owns Marathon.
I did not know that.
Yeah. But, I think there's, there are places where you go buy running stuff. And if vendors don't sell that stuff to that store anymore, I don't know if that store exists. And then there are stores that are a brand only, formed to serve a market or create a specific aesthetic for a place, for a person, for a larger market, with venture capital help to, build and serve communities in a way that builds the brand to be sold and make those people their money back. That's how venture works, right? So, for us, it was, I think I love that we have a powerful brand identity. I think there's also sort of an expectation that we're people also. We started our business with the 2 owners working side by side, having all of the business on our own personal credit cards, and having cashed out our retirement everything has to do right by the customer. No one, and our leadership team is like building their future career at someplace else, or we're just trying to do the best we can by every person who walks in the door. So I think there's just a real human element to what we do that I hope resonates, and sort of we want our spaces to be reflective of the people who come in. And there's almost like in some ways it drives me insane, but just the idea that it's not a clean business all the time, right? You're sort of invited in, and your family, like, this is our house, and it's just, this is how it is. So, there's a clean brand and ideas, and you just kind of have to buy into the ideas and understand the feeling to get it, I think. And I think a lot of people do. And I think our presentations are always getting better, but I think there's a lack of corporate BS because there's a lack of corporate BS. This is, you're in the corporate office. I'm the only one who sits in here. It's not like we have all the lawyers are hiding and they're spying on us, or that, the VCs are like, we got to go raise more funds, like we're just hoping we don't go out of business with our big ideas like moving to LA. So I think there's just a humanity to the business that I think really comes through with sort of, I think getting better at what we do is making sure that when we're speaking through the brand, we're still like leading with the humanity. I think that's the benefit or the strength of the brand is it's heartbreak, it's love. I always say to go deep in love or to go all in on a race and anything and a job and life. The flip side of that is heartbreak, right? If you go all in, if you don't, there's no such thing as heartbreak. There's not much at risk for you. I think that just resonates on a human level, and it matters to anybody who's ever cared about anything. So it's a fun way to make a living, and I think we try to make sure that we pass that through the business all the time. Everybody walks in.
Yeah, you talk about the lack of corporate BS, and I feel like there are a lot of running brands right now. I don't know if we can name names.
I'm not.
Okay, he's not naming names. They have this rough around the edge aesthetic. That's sort of like this grungy urban aesthetic, but it also seems extremely calculated and polished. And I guess it's really nice to know that when it comes to Heartbreak, you have a similar aesthetic in the sense that it is a little of that rough around the edges, except it is 100% authentic. I think that resonates with a lot of people, and it resonates with a lot of runners. I feel like runners in general are incredibly conscientious and community oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And running right now is having like a huge moment. Like it's insane. Like everyone seems like it's running. Maybe it's just my TikTok and Instagram algorithm. Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But in past episodes, we've talked about this boom of the running industry. And while we've talked about this insane involvement of community, we've also speculated about the sustainability of that upwards trend.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who's really keyed into that space, who has done a ton of community building in that space, what are your thoughts on the future of running in pop culture?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's an interesting thing to ask. I don't really care, to be honest. I know it's an odd answer, but I can tell you why. It's like surfing. I've only ever done what I wanted to do for a living. I ran track. I volunteer coached track at Boston College after, worked at a running store, left that. So I wanted to surf more, worked at Quicksilver, left Quicksilver, went back into running. It's like the only two things I do are all I ever did for a career also, which is a double-edged sword when you make your thing you do also your career, but I just don't really know a different way. And so it's like asking a surf shop, like, well, are you going to pivot to, rollerblade shop when surfing isn't as cool anymore? It's like, no, this is a surf shop. Like, I don't care what other people do. And we're a running brand, like before the running boom, we were here. During the running boom, we're here, so it's, I think there's, whatever the stats are, a lot of people go running, a lot more are running, but I think a lot of people were running 10 years ago also. So, and we're so small in the grand scheme of things that, if we're doing a good job at what we're doing, there's lots of opportunity for growth. We've now seen plenty of companies come and go just on, not even running businesses on our block in the South End. Like when we opened, it was, you open a business, you're now a part of this business community where, I had this level of respect in the city as a business owner. I'm invited to like magazines used to be more important, but like Boston magazine parties used to be really cool. And the proper Bostonian, which doesn't exist, that all have parties and like these, and I'm invited as a business owner. Meanwhile, I live in the back of my shop on a linoleum floor as wide as that, but I'm at this like all these cool swanky parties, and a lot of those businesses and that magazine don't even exist anymore. It's like you just sort of, but it feels like very hopeful in that business community. And then people's lives evolve, the businesses evolve, and they change and they go away. So at this point, I'm just really proud of the fact that we've been able to sustain our business and grow our business and do it thoughtfully, pragmatically. You can credit Justin, my business partner, for making sure that we're still around. He watches that very, very tightly. And the ability to run a business is as important as all the brand identity, all of the rough around the edges, perceived, manufactured or otherwise. It all needs to actually work on a business sense. If we had the money of some of our apparel brand competitors, would be bigger, we would have made more mistakes, and we may not still be in business. for us, I think it's really clear that money allows a lot more to go wrong, and you don't have to figure out how to fix it. So being self-funded, there's a keen awareness of the pain and poor decision making. So I'm not the boom or bust doesn't matter to me at all. It's strictly about, like, we're doing what we do for the people who do it. We used to really channel all of, before the pandemic, I used to have Thursdays only in the South End. I led every Tuesday night, every Tuesday morning, every Thursday night, and Saturdays during the Boston Marathon. So I was really the only coach. So, and then the pandemic happened, and I was like, well, when we get back together, when we start to reboot the run clubs, let's do it at all the stores, so it's just smaller. And I liked that, sort of like, we can do big things. We've had 1,000-person shakeout runs. We have weekly sessions of a dozen of people at some stores, so I think it's all about serving the athlete, doing it well, doing right by people, and providing the best service we can anywhere in the world. That's why our training journeys are digital. That's why digital and person. You guys are obviously local, so you get the best of both worlds. But I know we have people who train hard in Thailand on our training, which is awesome when we get to meet them at our global shakeout runs in Chicago and Boston. For me, it's like, I don't really care about the boom. That'll shake out which brands matter and which ones go away and which ones just get acquired by, giant retailers to be a part of their athletic collection. And yeah, we'll see where we shake out. But I'm it's one of those things, like, it's just who we are. We're not going to change.
And that's something, so you mentioned before, you've always been able to do what you love for work as a profession. And I think that's something that a lot of people strive for, and I think very few people are able to do. And part of what it sounds like you've been really successful at is being able to maintain your vision and your identity for Heartbreak while also maintaining the autonomy of it being what you want it to be. And I think that's really cool. And I think that's really rare for a lot of brands. I think struggle with that, especially in a changing space where you have, you talk about 15 years ago, there was no Instagram, and you have been in this industry long enough that you have had to evolve and adapt and lean into that new marketing strategy. And you talk about there were no magazines before, or there were magazines before, and that's really not that big a deal anymore. Yeah. Now you're coming on podcasts here, getting interviewed in your office.
Right.
But I don't know. I think it's really special. You did mention coaching, and that's something we want to talk about as well. So I met you at a Tuesday morning Reggie session. I think it was the first time I had spoken to you. And I think it's really cool that in your role, you're able to do both the business, the community outreach side of things, and also coach runners. Talking about doing what you love. What is your favorite part of coaching runners, and what do you think is the most challenging part of coaching runners, especially in this capacity?
My favorite part of coaching runners is just seeing people come into their own power, seeing them understand their own capacity in new ways. There's so many, you never know what anybody's going through, and you work with enough, members of the public, and you really start to feel that I remember early on in my coaching career, I coached about 15 nonprofit organizations for the Boston Marathon. And one of them is Mass General Hospital. It started with Red Cross, and then now it's, another 13 plus. And what old was I? 30 at that point. I hadn't meet people with problems, but you don't really have the problems you have as you get older. So as everyone I knew had run the marathon had raised money because they wanted to run the marathon, number one, and then secondarily they found a charity. So it's very simple for me to ask, hey, why are you running this? But once I started coaching MGH, it's the pediatric oncology unit, and it only takes a couple times for you to realize when you're talking to parents whose children are being treated and in the pediatric oncology unit, and their emotional relationship to the whole experience is so different. They didn't come in as runners. They're signed up for the marathon because it's a way to channel the energy of your child going through cancer treatment. Probably the scariest thing a parent could ever go through, and you can just see and feel the emotion on their face. And I remember just having to hold space for that, and in a retail context, fitting them in shoes, and then guiding the training journey. So I think you just have to take that really seriously and respectfully, and understand that the story is just one person, right? And then guiding that person through the first meeting when they're terrified of what they signed up for, the Boston Marathon, and then to going to, I remember there's one woman in particular, I remember her being terrified at the opening meeting in December, and then It was the Wednesday after longest long run, and we were doing a hill workout together with Team MGH, and she was just jogging along next to me. And I just remember her specifically saying, how am I ever going to run 20 miles? And then after she does the 20 miles, I was like, and here you are, 4 days after running 20 miles, jogging up Heartbreak Hill with me in between intervals. I was like, I told you it would work out, and she was pumped. And just seeing that over and over and over, it's like really satisfying to see people go through all different things, whether, there's usually, or often there's something hard they're going through emotionally that's fueling the running, or maybe it's just like they're turning 30, 40, 50, or 25 and they want to prove they can do something, or they just went through a breakout.
Or they're in their mid-20s.
Yeah, or they're in their mid-20s and they're running their 50th marathon in 50 days. Yeah, there's a zillion different reasons, right? So it's cool to be able to be sort of a thoughtful guide and steward of that experience, just knowing that they're going to get through it. They're going to see their own power, be patient. That's the really fun part. I think the hardest part is sometimes just getting people to slow down and understand, like, I don't have all the answers for them any more than they do, or that they have all the answers they need. You just got to get out there and do a little bit today and a little bit tomorrow. Like slowing people down and getting them to understand that there's not a right way to do things. There are some principles you need to follow, but there's, I always say there are as many ways to run a marathon as there are marathoners. No one does the same exact thing, right? No matter what. So yeah, I think it's a fun job.
Well, we've certainly loved collecting the perspectives of all the marathoners that we've had on the podcast so far, because you're absolutely right. No two people have had the same reason for doing it. No two people have had the same takeaways or the same approach. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's beautiful about it is obviously this very community-based sport, but it is also so individual and so personal. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you sharing your experience coaching people through charities. And I know personally, and I think Francis would agree with me, I've loved speaking with the charity runners that we've been able to interview or meet just through our own running journeys and learning about what inspires them. I think a lot of people might think you have to be self-motivated to be a runner, and you obviously need to be disciplined, but it's been amazing hearing about the people who run for reasons that are so much bigger than themselves. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine that must be incredibly rewarding to empower these people and help them to do something that is so personal and meaningful to them.
Yeah, for sure.
So you talk about coaching, you talk about coaching all of these charity runners for the Boston Marathon and what goes into that and your relationship with those runners. What do you think makes a good coach versus a bad coach, or someone who's maybe less effective at coaching? Because it's very easy to read a workout and tell someone what to do. It's an entirely different thing, I feel like, to effectively coach someone. And as somebody who has at least one athlete right now myself, this is a coworker.
God help them.
Great, they're doing great. Actually, I'm
just making fun of you.
Proud of their progress so far. Like, how do you make sure that the coaching is, like you said, thoughtful, it's authentic, and it's, above all else, effective?
Mm-hmm. Well, I should preface that I only have 2 personal clients. So you guys know me mostly in the public context, where coaching whoever shows up and I'll see them, every week or a couple times a week or once ever, I never know. But I think for me, the most important thing about being a coach is no one has a secret sauce. There's no patentable, maybe there is, I'm not going to go figure it out. No patentable way to, train a marathoner. It's speed workouts, long runs, easy runs. I think the most important thing for a coach to do is listen and understand where their athlete's coming from and what their capacity is. I think for me, coaching isn't about taking my framework and putting it on someone and seeing what happens. It's about listening to them and helping them get a little bit better. I didn't coach this person, but there was an athlete who asked me, I think she qualified for Boston running it was either 1 or 2 days a week. And she was a serious gym rat. She was one of those Equinox members who goes to, 10 classes a week or something, and is always working out. So she was such a unique person. And I remember saying, what do you think about, running a marathon on 2 days a week? And I was like, what does it matter what I think? You qualified for Boston. Like, that's a lot of people's life dreams. Like, clearly it works for you. Like, what am I going to add to that? It's being a good coach is like having humility and understanding that you don't know everything, that it's important not to know everything, to make sure you don't speak about things you don't know. Like if somebody has an issue, I don't want to be a half-assed PT. I don't want to be a half-assed doctor. I'm qualified to be neither of those things at even a half-assed level. So I'm not going to pretend I am. It's go see a professional in that designation. And when you're a healthy athlete, then I can come into play, help you make the best decisions for yourself. But understanding that flexibility, I think listening and flexibility are the most important things, and caution, not just experimenting on an athlete because you're curious what would happen, like just making sure that you're protecting their future runs and protecting their goals, and hearing what they're saying they need. Most often they tell you what they need to be doing when they're explaining where they're at, is what I find. But yeah.
That reminds me of when we had Devin come on the pod, and he talked about his coaching philosophy and how he would never put one of his athletes through something that he hasn't tried himself first. Like, they're not lab rats, they're athletes, and you want to be there to support them. But yeah, it's interesting hearing that.
That's so interesting when you talk about like forcing people into frameworks too, because especially now with social media, like so much value is placed on interactions, or very, very shallow interactions, certainly not authentic interaction. And in order to do that, you need content that is extremely easy to digest. It's very easy to deliver. There's definitely a lot of people who will post something on Instagram or TikTok and say, these are the 5 things I did to qualify for Boston. Like, that right there is, a gold star TikTok. Like, that format is perfect. People are going to click on that. But anything that they might be talking about, like you said, could work for someone, but you could also just qualify for Boston on 2 runs a week. And it's dangerous to encourage people or to say something works 100% of the time when it works for you and you haven't exposed other people to like a specific technique. And I know Brian and I are currently trying to branch out in our social media space, and it's a little bit discouraging that you have to make content that kind of fits that mold, and trying to have a balance really of being informative, but then also meeting the viewer where they're at, which is with an incredibly small attention span. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I think I made an Instagram reel the other day, and Francis was like, this is too long, it has to be 30 seconds. And I know that that's what we love about the podcast, is we get to sit down with you for an hour and a half here and talk about everything that we want to talk about. But most people's attention spans these days are just those 30-second sound bites, and you need it to be short and you need it to be digestible.
Right.
And I agree, it is a little bit frustrating that you have to kind of navigate that and almost buy into that.
Or maybe just avoid it altogether. Like, can I even should I be even offering tips on Instagram if it's only going to be 30 seconds long? Like, I can't tell someone the nuances of why threshold training is important in 30 seconds. Like, it takes at least 2 minutes.
Well, I don't want to be
or longer.
I don't want to be doing that though. Like, I don't want to be telling people what to do, and I don't think that's why we're doing the podcast. It's to be sharing people's stories and having a space to share people's stories. And I like what Mike Beeman said last week. He was talking about how funny it is. There's these influencers who run 3 marathons and they think that they're an expert. Mike Beeman's ran 111 marathons, Boston 48 times. He goes, I'm not an expert. You are certainly not an expert. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't want to be telling people what to do and the way to the right or wrong way. Dan, we love talking about running gear. We love talking about running shoes. Before we get into shoes, I'm curious, you're very keyed into this space. So there has been a lot of new gear coming out recently. I'm curious if there are any new technologies or pieces of apparel that have caught your eye that you are particularly excited about, that have either recently been released or might be coming to Heartbreak stores soon.
If you can say.
I'm pretty basic when it comes to that stuff. We have a new short coming out. We have a short called Good Times. It's sort of a play on words, good times or good times, having a good time or running a good time. And also our former GM of Boston, we called him Benny Good Times. So it's really a nod to him. Our new men's half tight is called the Fast Times. And it's, shorter, lower rise and shorter length with a zipper on the side. So I'm very excited about that. I've been running in that a lot. It's not going to land you on the moon or anything. It's just a pair of men's half tights, but I'm excited about that.
In the broader running sense, do you feel like there are some products that are just kind of smoke and mirrors? And would you feel comfortable talking about them specifically?
Maybe if you give me some examples.
Well, I'm thinking like from like a nutrition standpoint, there's definitely things out there that like I know there's a scandal, a couple, maybe not a scandal, maybe that's too strong a word, but there was
that'll get clicks.
yeah. There was a
Huge scandal.
yeah, I want to make sure I get it right.
Huma, the gels.
No. It was a different gel, but it was one that
I remember
was
this.
not it was not delivering the advertised calorie.
I remember reading something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was supposed to be really high, or was supposed to be really high, or
It was supposed to be like what it said, and it was like
It
less
was like
than
half the
that.
carbs
Yeah.
I
that were
remember
supposed to
reading
be in the
about
gel.
that. Yeah, the funny thing is, I had a conversation with a new nutrition company last week that, I don't know, I'm reluctant to get too excited about that stuff. I guess the creatine is coming back on the thing. I tried that when I was in college. One of my coaches just said, I'll take anything if it's legal and will help me. So I was like, well, all right, that's one way to do it. She had tried it, and I don't think it worked very well for her, and it didn't work very well for me. So I never went back or cared about it. I think I tried it 5 months, 3 months. I just try to keep it basic. I think like whole nutrition, real food, running, sleep, lifting. I don't really go too hard on the gimmicks. I have a Garmin watch. I have the new Phoenix 8. It's kind of expensive, but I like it.
Do you think the metal body slows down your times?
It hasn't yet, not that I know of.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
The sleep tracker seems a little suspect sometimes, but yeah, I'm not too much of a gear junkie, I have to say. It's a pretty simple sport. I mean, the things that get me excited are like footwear, the footwear technology, and the Nike leading the way with Breaking 2 and the first 4%, and what that created in the market, I think is still reverberating. And Faith just trying Breaking 4 and some pretty wild spikes with its own. I think this is, I haven't talked to anybody, but I think the looked like the airbag was a little bigger in the forefoot.
I think it was the largest air unit in a running shoe.
Yeah. And then the heel was definitely more padded, and it's an exhibition, so it's all good. But that stuff I think is really exciting, is what it spawned the last time Kipchoge did that, and those things are exciting because they really make a difference, and you can feel the difference. And we have technology now where used to be if you bought the premier marathoning shoe, you'd just get injured. It's like it wasn't, they're so thin and so light. It was like the most nothing you could get was when we opened the shop. Our first ever like hot seller was the Mizuno Universe, it was called. And I forget what it weighed, but it was like the midsole was that thick, and it was the lightest shoe on the market by a significant margin. And it was our first like buzzy hot seller. And now just the way the whole world has flipped to these super shoes, and the fact that they work for so many people is really exciting. That technology is accessible and really works for a wide variety of athletes, I think makes the sport more fun.
And I feel like for a wide variety of applications, I've seen people wearing super shoes on planes.
Yeah,
I've seen people shopping with them.
Vaporflies in the wild.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. It's
good.
Love to see it.
It's good for me.
Dan,
yeah, true.
Dan, what shoes are in your rotation right now? What are you liking running on these days?
I run in the Nike Structure. I was running in that most often for years. It went out of favor, and I bought a lot of them to just have them on ice because they stopped making it. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to keep buying the whatever Structure 24 or 22. I don't know which one, but I had a whole bunch on ice. And then, I went through them, and other like pros I'd meet with or chat with, seemed to have the same collection of structures hanging around. I remember like Kate Grace wore it, and Galen Rupp had some. Anyway, so I'd always been a diehard Structure runner. And then the new Vomero came out, and I always wear at the session what we're promoting. If we're powered by Nike Sessions, I'm a Nike running coach. If the new Pegasus is out, that's what I'm going to be wearing when I coach. And then I would go to my car, put on my Structures, and go for my run. and the Vomero came out, and I remember like walking out of the Reggie, and I was just like, these are like fun to walk in. Oh, you got them on. And I was like, these feel even good walking. Like these are amazing. And I was like, I need to get a pair of these. And I hit up Russell and got a pair. And that shoe is like, I think it's really, to me, it feels like how I would hope a running shoe would make running feel. Like it actually makes it feel a little bit more fun. It makes it feel like a little bouncier, a little easier. Like I'm curious about how the Vomero Plus feels, because it replaces the React and it's all Zoom X. But I think there's something to the blend. I'm not sold on I'm just going to like the Plus because it's Plus. I really love the way this one feels. It's like the perfect blend of, I don't know, return and softness. So for me, that shoe, I've been blown away by how good that shoe is. And I've even gotten it on the feet of a few skeptics, and they've been like, wow, I love it. So
Yeah, I think we had Russell on in an episode. I think it was like our 4th episode. And Brian and I were talking about like when we started the podcast, we were like, if we get free shoes from this, then it will be worth it. We can hang up everything, all the gear, it's done. And then like the 4th episode, Russell's like, oh yeah, guys, I'm not gonna come empty-handed, like as a thing. Like, and then so he pulls out the Vomeras, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we have so many more episodes that we have to make still. I didn't think it was gonna happen this fast, but
Maybe we'll have to have Russell back on to talk about the Vomero
the
Plus.
pluses, yeah.
The Vomero
smart.
Plus.
Would be a good idea.
Yeah.
No, it was interesting getting to break down the Vomero too, because it is interesting, and I don't think I'm a max cushion guy, and I think it took a little bit of adjusting, just getting used to running in them, because they are so plush, but the foam, like, they're
pop.
They're fun to
They
run.
pop.
Yeah.
They're fun. It's like
And they
pleasant.
look good too.
They look great. I
I
show
agree.
up to Thursday night at the MIT track, and I feel good.
Yeah, they're good. They're good. I mean, because I've had other, like the Invincible, the one that was all ZoomX before. Just, I don't like all the travel you get in ZoomX necessarily. When I'm racing, it feels fine, and the plated shoes. But this one has, it's just a good blend of return and softness. I have to say, I'm a big fan.
So before we wrap things up, obviously the signature speed sessions on Tuesday morning have just started with an eye on the Mob Mile at the end of the summer, and then the Chicago Marathon this fall. I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what's coming up for Heartbreak in the near future. What do people have to look forward to?
Well, you nailed 2 of them. In Heartbreak World, the Mob Mile, people can head to the website, heartbreak.run. You can go to heartbreak.run/Mob Mile, or just navigate there from heartbreak.run. Chicago Marathon is another big one. The training journey this year, we're calling it Take Me Higher. It's Marielle did sort of the due diligence around the creation of house music and its origins in the city of Chicago, and the idea of like being in this counterculture dance music movement that was, largely Black, welcoming to gay, trans communities, and really centered in Chicago. And it was sort of the antithesis of disco, where disco was, in the clubs, really exclusive. This was much more gritty and, like a house party vibe, or warehouse party vibe. And so Take Me Higher is a reference to just that feeling of like the rhythmic music pulsing and just sort of the euphoric state you get in. And then also something about signing up for a marathon and just like the expectation that it's like you're better angels, in a sense that you're hoping to rise, that this training will take you higher as an athlete, as a human being. So super excited to like feel that journey come to life, through conversation, through product, and then through experiences on the race weekend. So that's something I'm excited about. We have a new collection coming out end of July, a Heartbreak apparel collection. There's a big footwear release coming up with a vendor, and that's a not a collab with us, but an exciting collab in the world that we'll have a major part in, which we're very excited about that. Can't say more than that now. What else is going on? We're never not doing stuff. So it's always like, how many things can I possibly forget? I think the energy of World Cup in the world is just exciting, even though it's not a running event. There is a lot of running for people who don't have the soccer ball under their feet. So even people with the ball are doing a lot of running. So I think just the energy of sport and interplay there is exciting for next year. Yeah, but just trying to get LA off the ground and do more storytelling about what we're doing as a brand and as a community, really, I think is what excites me most.
Amazing. Well, if anyone listening is interested in learning more about what's going on at Heartbreak, like Dan said, go to heartbreak.run, and you should absolutely sign up for the Mob Mile. You might just have the chance to race Francis and I.
Potentially beat us.
Potentially beat us.
That sounds pretty hard, though.
Francis is trying to break 5.
Yeah.
My mile PR from Mob Mile last summer was a 5:44, which I felt pretty good about at the time, but now I feel bad about talking to Francis, but I will be hoping to beat that a little bit. But yeah, we'll definitely see you out there.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Dan, for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. This
Thank you so much.
been a long time in the making, in the sense that we've been talking about having you come on for a long time, and I think the stars aligned, and so we're really happy to make this happen.
I'm always just an ask away. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Today's guest was Chief Heartbreaker, Nike running coach, and co-founder of the Heartbreak Hill Running Company, Dan Fitzgerald. If you're interested in learning more about what's going on at Heartbreak this summer, you can go to heartbreak.run, and you should head over to the MIT track on Tuesday mornings for their signature speed sessions powered by Nike Running, and you might just catch Francis and I there. But before we take off, Francis, you have a fun fact for us, right?
I do have a fun fact. So The Heartbreak Hill Running Company is obviously named for Heartbreak Hill, but the actual name of the hill itself comes from a moment in the 1936 Boston Marathon where the two front runners, Ellison Tarzan Brown and Johnny Kelly, were fighting their way up Heartbreak Hill. Kelly overtook Brown and led for a few miles, and then at the last minute, Brown overtook Kelly, ultimately winning the Boston Marathon. This reportedly broke Kelly's heart, and the hill has been called that ever since.
Thank you all for listening to the Zone 2 podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram at the Zone 2 podcast. You can catch new episodes streaming every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.